All right, so it is very important that we come to understand the nature of the mind, right? And because the mind is something which is extremely important for us, okay? So Geshe would like to read a little bit from the text that is called, 1 minute, it is the text from Gaden Shartse Control Tsering, and the text is called where it is? It is called the nature, the title of the text is The Nature of the Mind, the Clear Mirror. All right, I will start, and hopefully you can boost perhaps a signal or something. All right, so we're starting, and Geshe was saying, obviously, at the beginning of the text, in the composition of Cancer, the Geshe, the Cancer who has composed these texts, they're following right after homage, which is the pledge of composition, and in that comes urging, a line that is urging the students about to explain the nature of the mind. Sure. Okay, so at the beginning of the composition, we find that we have a few verses of homage. We will not read those. We read this, we will skip, and we come into the next part, which is the pledge of composition. The pledge of composition begins with a line that says, control your mind, do not allow your mind to be scattered here and there. Listen carefully with an honest and open mind as I am about to explain the nature of the mind. All right. So it begins by talking a little bit about the nature of the mind, and it says the nature of the mind is something that is unobstructed, and it's something that is clear and knowing. Although it is something unobstructed, it is not something that can be perceived by the eyes. Therefore, he says, I will have to find a way to describe it, although it does not have a particular form or shape or color, and it therefore cannot be perceived in this way. All of us, we have a mind, and all of us are equal in having experiences of suffering and happiness. We're also equal in the sense that we all wish to experience happiness. However, because most people are not capable of clearly understanding or identifying the nature of the mind, they proceed with various activities thinking, most probably I understand how happiness will come. And if I proceed in this way, happiness will come. However, without having a clear understanding, we find that people fail to achieve this happiness that they are seeking for. So without being able to clearly differentiate between what is suffering and what is happiness, we go along our lives sort of like guessing, in a guessing manner. And at the same time, we have the wish and say, oh, I wish to have as much happiness as possible. Now, this wish that says, I would like to have happiness, I would like to avoid suffering, is something that is not exclusive to us. It is something that we find even in the animals. However, humans have something above the animals, and therefore, because we're humans and we have human intelligence, we should be able to clearly identify the nature of the mind and may be able to make the distinction of what is happiness and what is suffering. So, as we say, it is very important for us to examine the nature of the mind. We say that we have mind or intelligence that is superior to those of animals, and therefore we should seek for something that goes above the basic happiness or escape of suffering that the animals are seeking for. If we're looking for happiness, we should be looking for a stable happiness, not a trifle happiness that disappears the next moment. So if we're looking for a happiness, we should look for the absolute best, the supreme the superior type of happiness. And if we are seeking to be free from suffering, we should be looking for a permanent separation from suffering, not a situation that, you temporarily you're separated and then you go straight back into suffering. All right, so it is very important, since this is the level of what we should be aiming for, what we are seeking for, it is very important to very clearly differentiate between what really is happiness and what really is suffering. Our mind must clearly identify this. For us, ordinary beings, although we say that we are seeking for happiness, we are seeking for the utmost, the most excellent happiness, as a matter of fact, in the condition that we're here as ordinary beings, we are totally mistaken. We have the completely wrong understanding. What we consider to be as happiness, Arya beings look at it and they shake their head because they say this is actually suffering. And what Aryas consider to be as the utmost happiness, we look at it and we judge it to be suffering. So as you can see, there's a huge discrepancy. We're making a really big mistake in misunderstanding what happiness really is. So what is illustrated here is that actually our consciousness, our awareness, you could say our mind, and our feelings, like our experiences, are actually on a very coarse level. So since our consciousness is in a coarse level, we cannot actually make fine distinctions. And the example that is given here is, imagine if a hair or an eyelash were at the palm of your hand. Now, most of the times you would not even feel it, so it would not register. And this is because our awareness is coarse. It doesn't perceive something so subtle. However, if that hair was in the body of an Arya, the Arya will feel it so acutely, as if, an eyelash had entered in their eye. They will be acutely aware, whilst we are totally unaware. So it is like this because we have this incorrect understanding, wrong understanding. We grasp at things that we consider to be happiness, but in reality, those things are not happiness at all. And this is the reason why we end up experiencing so much suffering within samsara. The primary reason how we actually enter within samsara is because we don't understand the nature of the mind. And if you don't understand the mind, you will not understand how the mind engages different objects. You don't understand how the mind operates. So that will lead you to enter within samsara, and then within samsara experience different types of suffering. We don't need to elaborate on the types of suffering. It's like all the unhappiness, all the troubles, all the suffering we continuously experience. So for those individuals who wish to proceed to that state of permanent, stable happiness, they need to understand that there are many objects of study. Actually, the objects of study are so many that it is almost impossible for us to engage all of those. However, the most important thing to study is this presentation of the mind. If you cannot come to study the presentation of the mind, you will not be able to proceed to this state of permanent happiness that you wish for. And as Master Shantideva says, the objects of study are so many and our lives is so short. So actually you have to choose the most important subject, which is the presentation of the mind. So you could say that actually our first and utmost wish is to understand exactly those things. And this is why we will make the effort to talk and present, study the mind and awareness. All right. So when we talk about the mind, right, you have to understand that different schools or different groups have different presentations. So there are some who say it is like this, some who say no, it's not like this, it is the opposite. So there are different presentations of the mind. So, for example, there are those who believe that the mind is permanent. There are those who believe that the mind is impermanent. Now, we as Buddhists, we do not believe that the mind is permanent. Now, there is a reason why people say that the mind is permanent. Kedru Rinpoche actually has dedicated lengthy part in his works to explain where these people are coming from. It is not a great benefit for our class to go into those arguments, but just to simplify the position, the reason is because these people, they say the mind is permanent because they experience a lot of suffering. And they say, there was a mind yesterday, there's a mind today, there will be a mind tomorrow. Actually, the problem comes from not being able to correctly positing a continuum, right? So even if they talk about the yesterday's mind and today's minds and tomorrow minds, they don't really understand how to posit impermanence. We as Buddhists definitely present the mind as being impermanent. Okay, so as you can see here, we're going through different positions, and from those you just have to keep, let's say, the core position, right? There's a lot of different presentations. There is a presentation, the mind. There is obscuration in the mind, or there is obstruction, or there is no obstruction, or there is permanent or impermanent. And as you can see, we have already mentioned a couple of positions. There is no obstruction in the mind, and also the mind is impermanent. Just keep these 2 points. So, as we say here, there is debate because there are some who say the mind does not exist, others who say definitely the mind exists. For us, we posit, of course, that the mind exists, and we say mind, awareness, and mentality are synonyms. Okay, so definitely we say the mind exists. Now, how are we going to go about establishing this? As we say, the mind is not something which is material, is not something that is perceived by the eyes or the senses. So there is nothing that we could point our finger and we say, look over there, there's a mind, is red or is yellow. That object over there is the mind. We cannot do this, right? So there must be another way of understanding or showing that there is a mind. And the way that we go about it is the experience we have. All of us, we have pleasurable and unpleasurable experiences. So, for example, imagine that when you meet your family or your friends, you experience this joy, this happiness, isn't it? Or when you meet with something unfavorable, an unpleasant situation, maybe an enemy, and so forth, you experience something unpleasant, even anger arising in your mind. We all have these experiences, from the smallest living being, like the little ant that is crawling on the ground, to every other living being. Everybody is having these experiences. If there is an experience, there is someone or something that has the experience. So this is exactly what the mind is. And everybody, even those who say that the mind is permanent, or those who don't believe in the existence of the mind, everybody knows that there is experience and there is someone experiencing it. So Geshe was saying, I think that through our direct knowledge of this experience, that's the best way to establish the existence of the mind. You don't need to go through technical logic path to establish it. Look at your experience, and everybody accepts this. So we know that sometimes, for example, we develop attachment for our people, those who are on our own side. Sometimes we develop hatred or aversion for those who are on the other side, the other group, and so forth. But we see that there is something within us that motivates us, who gives orders. And we see that our body and all our physical, verbal, and so forth activities follow the order of that thing. There is something that tells me, lift up your arm. There's something that tells me, put down your arm. There's something that tells me, go. Something that says, sit down. Someone within me says, eat this food. Someone who says, speak. Someone who says within you, who gives you the order and say, now listen to the speaker, isn't it? So there is someone within us, within our body, who gives the orders. Although it is not something or someone that we can perceive with our eyes, nevertheless, we know that there are orders are given. Someone in there is in control. And our body, the different limbs of the body, and follow whatever orders are given, right? So at one particular point, it's as if you receive the order that says, speak, eat, go to the garden. And when you receive that order to go to the garden, suddenly you start looking, where's the garden? Where can I go to the garden? Right? So it's something within us that motivates us, activates us, put us into motion, and we obey these orders. So as you can see, we can all feel that there is something there, there is a mind there, although it doesn't have a color or a shape, and we cannot see it, and we cannot point the finger. We all understand. We also, all of us, we think that it is not outside the body, it is actually inside the body, something internal. Now, as to exactly where it is in the body and as to what is its nature, now here we have a great variety of position. There are some who say is within the veins, some who say it is within the blood itself, some who say it is in the brain, right? Some who say it's within each part of the body, each limb and part of the body, and so forth. Okay, so because it's something that is not perceivable, we cannot see it, you can see that, for different people, different thoughts arise in their mind, and this is the best way to conceive it. This is the best way to comprehend or describe it. So they put forward this presentation and they grasp at this presentation. Okay, so, there is a very popular idea that the mind is the brain, and also the majority of people are looking to find the mind in the four elements, the elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and so forth, isn't it? Now, it's interesting because often when we say, I've got to think with my mind, and we point the finger here, indicating the brain, isn't it? And other people say, you've got to think with your mind, and they point towards the heart. Okay, but Geshe was saying a thing in both of those cases, it is mistaken. We need to hold into our own presentation. The mind is not something material. And the mind, the nature of the mind is clear and knowing. So stop trying to associate it with the brain or the heart or another specific part of the body. So what we are searching today, what we are trying to comprehend, to understand really, is the mind. So let's look at certain characteristics. First of all, the mind is unobstructed, unimpeded. Unimpeded indicates that the mind can actually go and travel long distance, your mind is not impeded or is not blocked by a material object. So, for example, your mind can go behind the door, can reach behind the door. Your mind can go a long distance. So it is unimpeded by material obstacles or distances and so forth. That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is that the mind is impermanent. Why? Because it is changeable under the influence of conditions. So there comes a particular combination of conditions, and suddenly you're happy, you're very pleased. The conditions change, and you find that the happy mind has now become quite stressed and quite unhappy. Once again, some condition changes, and the mind that was unhappy and under strain again is uplifted and is feeling much better. So you see conditions affected, and it is changeable. And therefore, we say it is impermanent. That's the second characteristic. The third characteristic is that that thing pervades, or in other words, it is found on all living, breathing organisms. And the next characteristic is that it has the nature of clear and knowing. All right. So obviously here we talk about the mind. The mind is going to cognize, to recognize, to realize a particular object. By cognizing this object, it brings about this clarity, right? So that clearly, it knows clearly. It brings the clarity that removes the unclarity. Before you recognize the object, you had unclarity, but the mind cognizes and therefore brings about this clarity in terms of its object. Okay, so what we have given you here is a number of characteristics. And if you put all these characteristics together, that will help you approach an understanding of what the mind is. As we say, we don't have an example. We cannot point the finger and say, this is the mind. Just put these characteristics together, and that gives you an understanding. Yes. So as you can see, we have these expressions, so this way of describing the mind, and we say the mind is unimpeded, the nature of the mind is clear and knowing. And Geshe was saying is not just that Khenso Rinpoche uses this expression, is not just that Geshe himself uses this expression, but we find exactly these expressions in this description in many of the sutras of the Buddha, such as, for example, the 8,000 verses Prajnaparamita, the descent to the Lankara Sutra, and so forth. There is the expression there that the mind is clear, the nature of the mind is to be unimpeded, it is clear and knowing, and whatever stains are there, they are adventitious. Not only in the sutras, but in the shastras, the other texts that we have, commentarial texts, such as, for example, from Master Shantideva, from Tsultrim Pakpa, and so forth. We find in many texts of great scholars, greatly realized beings, they all describe the mind with these words as having these characteristics. So Geshe says, relying on these great works, the sutras and the treatises, all composed by wise beings, we can have the confidence and decide that indeed this is the nature of the mind as it is described there. Now, we often talk about the nature of the mind, and we say it has the nature of clear light. So another way of interpreting this, an interpretation of the term clear light, the mind is clear light, refers to the fact that the mind is lacking inherent existence. Since beginningless time, from the very beginning, the mind is free from the stain of true existence. Therefore, the mind is lacking true existence. And therefore, you can see with this interpretation, the term clear light refers to reality, to emptiness, the emptiness of the mind, the lack of inherent existence of the mind. Now, in that sense, many say that you cannot actually realize, you cannot know the mind. Why? Because you don't realize the lack of inherent existence of the mind. So this lack of inherent existence of the mind is referred to as clear light. So Master Shantideva actually comments on these points and saying, without knowing the clarity of the mind, we experience a great reign of suffering. So where it says without knowing the clarity of the mind, it says you don't realize the crucial point, the actual nature of the mind. You don't realize the lack of inherent existence of the mind. So without knowing this crucial nature, this crucial characteristic of the mind, this is why, due to that, we experience continuous suffering. So we talk about the clarity of the mind. We say the mind is clear. The mind is clear and knowing. There are different ways of interpreting or understanding the term clear, right? So one way of understanding this is that the mind knows its object clearly, right? So you know how it is, for example, when with electricity, you turn on the lights. Before there was darkness, so let's say you didn't see, you didn't recognize any objects, you turn the lights on, suddenly you can see everything. So this is one thing with the mind. The mind can clearly know the object. Another understanding of the term clear is that through the mind, you can come to understand hidden phenomena. There's some phenomena that are obscure, they are hidden. However, the mind can illuminate these objects, can bring clarity to this object. So, Geshe was saying when we were studying about the mind, and we were given the definition, the mind is clear and knowing. This is the definition of the mind. The example that was given to us was like the mind is like clear water, isn't it? So you have clean, clear water. This is an example of the mind. So you can see we have to begin developing some understanding of what it means to have the clear light or the clear nature, clear and knowing the mind is clear. We must start to get some meaning for this clear. Yeah. Also, we can look in the sutras how it is described, and it says the mind is not an object of the eye's sources. It's not something which is graspable by your hands. It's not something that can be pointed to with your finger. It is something which is unimpeded. So this is describes here the characteristics of the mind. So it's not a solid object, it's not an external object, it's not something that your eyes can perceive. Definitely it's an internal object. Also, it's not something that you could hold in your hand, you could feel with, it's not physical. It's not something that you could point the finger and demonstrate. It's not like this, it's something unimpeded. Okay, also we see in Master Shantideva, he has another presentation where he says, awareness is that which is other than matter. Okay, so what is matter? Matter is a material object, something which is established by molecules or atoms. And here when we talk about atoms, we talk about the 8 types of atoms, the atoms of the 4 elements. So you have particles, maybe particle is a better word. So the earth particle, the water particle, the fire particle, the wind particle, and then you have another 4 particles that are derivatives of the 4 that we have already mentioned. Okay, so something that is established through the 8 types of particles is established as matter, is a material object. So the description here is that which goes beyond the material, meaning that which is not material, is awareness. Okay, so this statement here is not a statement to be taken as a debate, meaning, if it is not matter, Is it always the case? Is it pervasive that it is mind, that it is awareness? It's not to be taken as a debate in this way. This statement actually says that if it is mind, if it is awareness, you have to understand it is not material. Okay, also Master Shantideva in his work Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, it says, all the great scholars have said that mentality is not form. It is not composed of coarse or subtle molecules, and they are all in agreement. With one voice, they all agree. They all take this position, right? So the position of great scholars, all the great scholars, uniformly in our group, in the Buddhist group, right, is that the mind is not form, is not material. And then it says, other than the group that is called the Gyampenpa, who say that the mind is form, everybody else, such as, for example, the enumerators or the Jains, they also have the position that the mind is not form. So the only exception is that group, the Gyampenpas, who say that the mind is form. Okay, so it continues by saying, if we accept that the mind is actually made of molecules, many faults would follow from that. If you say that the mind consists of molecules, we only have two possibilities. We have coarse molecules and we have subtle molecules. All right, so let's follow the first option. So if you say that the mind consists or is made of coarse molecules, then it would have to be perceivable by sense awareness, isn't it? Your eyes, for example, should be able to see it if it is made of coarse matter. So you can say, you know, if you follow the first option and you say that the mind is made out of coarse molecules, if it is coarse, you should be able to see it. You know, there will be something, you know, something solid somewhere in your body, and with your eyes, sense awareness should be able to see it. So you see, that's the first fault. Logically, it cannot be it. Okay, let's go with the second object. So let's say that the mind is made out of subtle particles. So if it is subtle particles, the mind is subtle particles, I have two questions for you. Where is it found? Is it found all over the body, the parts of the body, or is it found in a specific part of the body, such as, for example, the brain? Where is it? All right. So then it goes, if you're going to say that the mind is made of subtle molecules and it pervades every part of the body, what happens in the case of a limb that is amputated? So let's say you cut off the arm, right? And now we're looking at the arm that you have cut off. So if you say that the mind is subtle particles that pervades every part, now you have this amputated limb, and then it would have to have mind in it. Is there mind in it? Okay, so we are asking this question, like we are pushing the opponent, right? And they come up with the answer. They have to give us a response, and the answer they say, no, there is no mind in this amputated limb, because the body has actually declined, is separated and has declined. So the opponent has says, yes, but you know, this the body has declined, and this is why there is no mind in this case. And then we come up back with a response to what they have said, and we say, then what happens at the time of sleep? Because at the time of sleep, we know that all the coarse level of sensory awareness subsides, declines, isn't it? And we're only left with the subtle awareness. So then we say, what is it? Is it like in this case, you know, like you closed your eyes, you're asleep, and you still have? Okay, so we continue, you know, with this thing, because the opponent says that the mind is subtle particle and pervades the entire body. right? So when we say, so what happens to this amputated arm when let's say they have surgery and they have to reattach it to the body? Is it that the mind shifts at this point? Is it reconnected at this point? What happens? So we run with this argument that the position of the opponent who says it's all over the body, and we say that doesn't stand to reason. So now let's examine the other position, that the mind is only found in one part of the body, and in particular the brain. So then we say, if awareness is only in the brain, what happens to your feet? Your feet cannot feel cold or hot, or they cannot feel, being pierced by, let's say, a thorn and so forth. Your feet cannot feel anything. They're so far away from the brain. If you put your feet into hot water, aren't your feet going to feel very hot, like burned, right? If you give massage to the feet, don't the feet feel something? So again, it's wrong to say that awareness or the mind is only in the brain. So we conclude this argument by saying to the opponent, this position that you have, that the mind is actually material, and then trying to justify this, saying perhaps it is coarse particles, perhaps it is subtle particles, perhaps it's all over the body, perhaps it is only in one part of the body. All of this doesn't stand to reason because, for example, in the formless realm, we have the beings of the formless realm. And since it is formless, if the mind was form, they would be missing mind. But the beings in the formless realm, they have mind. All right? Therefore, this discussion that the mind is form is not correct. It's wrong. Then again, in the argument that it is a subtle particle, but it is only concentrated, it's only found in the brain, right? Again, that doesn't stand to reason because we have living beings who, let's say, they don't have the brain, but nevertheless, they have mind. Okay, so then it concludes by a paragraph that says, like this, there is a lot of friction between different positions, and it is very hard to actually establish through scriptural quotation and logic. And we end up, if you have, it says if you have the intelligence of a bovine, it's very hard to establish with clarity these issues. What you need to do is you need to have wise, really well-educated people on this subject who can establish, apply the reason and the logic. So it is said that we have many areas of study, and all of them are quite high, quite elevated. So, for example, Pramanavartika, or the perfection of wisdom, or we have the middle way view, or we have Abhidharma. And it says if you don't understand this presentation of the mind, if you don't understand Lorig, it will be very difficult to gain access to these subjects, because these subjects are quite elevated. Therefore, it is said that Lorig, the presentation of mind, is like the ladder that will allow you to climb up and reach up to the level of these other broad areas of study. And also the great scholar Jamyang Shepa has said that if you really want to see if you have a correct or an erroneous understanding on the important issues of what is virtue and non-virtue, the two truths, the Four Noble Truths in terms of what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned, you have to look into the clear mirror of Lorig. So it makes the example, and it says that Lorig is very important. It's like the mirror. Within the mirror, you can very clearly see the various forms. So it says if you want to clearly see, to clearly understand what is virtue, what is not virtue, what is to be practiced, what is to be abandoned, the Four Noble Truths and so forth, where do you have to look? What do you have to study? You have to look into the mirror of Lorig. So as you can see here, it is quoted, it is said by many that this presentation, this understanding of the mind of Lorig is extremely important. But before we enter the study of Lorig, because even the study of Lorig, as it is important and fundamental, is quite difficult. So prior to entering Lorig, we need to do some preparatory study. And that preparatory study is the logic that comes with the presentation of Dura. So Geshe was saying, this is what is my intention. As we say, the main thing we want to study is Lorig, mind and awareness, but you cannot just jump out of nowhere into mind and awareness. You need that initial step. So the initial step is all the different topics that we have in Dura. They set up a path of reasoning. And once you have this under your belt, then you can start looking at the presentation of Lorig. So Geshe was saying, my intention is to thoroughly, we have a very good text, is a very good presentation of Lorig, and Geshe wants to go through the whole text in an extensive way. But to do this first, we must do some warming up with the Dura, the collected topics, subjects. Okay, so we can stop here for today. You have, Geshe has explained what is the idea, how we're going to do this semester, this subject matter. If you have any questions, we have a bit of time remaining. So please ask your question. Okay, so Geshe was thinking that we have a very good presentation here, and he would like to send this to the students to read this. This will be quite useful. Okay, so Geshe was saying, we were giving the characteristics of the mind, and we say the mind is immaterial, is unimpeded, can travel a long distance. We have the wind, when the wind is blowing, right? Do you think that the wind is similar to the mind? All right, so Geshe was saying that was a question to you, but in the beginning, when we gave the characteristics of the mind, we say the mind is unimpeded. Unimpeded means can go anywhere. You can't stop it. But with the wind, like if you put a wall, you stop the wind, don't you? So on the basis of this, you can say the wind is not mind. So we described the mind, we gave some characteristics, and if you think about those characteristics that we listed, you will form a good idea in your mind. Okay, so Geshe was saying, look, I understand that this is a new subject. We're talking here about the presentation of the mind. Most of you are new students. You have not studied this material before, right? So you're not accustomed to this presentation or to this material. And at the same time, it is a difficult subject. It is very involved subject. But having said this, Geshe says, I don't want anyone losing their confidence or your enthusiasm. You should be the opposite. You say, oh, this is a challenge. It is difficult. I'm not deflated. I'm not disappointed. I will be the opposite. I will persevere, isn't it? We need a challenge in order to persevere and do well. That's exactly what we need.
Hi, Voula. Okay, so we have a question here. Can Geshe help to give us more examples of how lacking understanding of the inherent existence can bring about suffering? Like how does it apply to us? How do we understand this further? And how do we link these two together?
Okay, so sorry, there's a little bit of echo. So you're asking how, if we understand the lack of inherent existence, this will reduce our suffering. Could Geshe give an example? Is this the question?
How the lack of understanding of inherent existence bring about suffering? How does it bring about suffering?
Okay.
Yeah, some examples.
Yeah. Okay, so Geshe was saying, imagine that you're looking for something sweet. Actually, you want to get a lot of sweet objects. but you go somewhere where there is nothing sweet. And it doesn't matter how hard you apply yourself, how far you go, how much you search, you dig the earth, you look up in the trees, you look everywhere, you try everything, but there is nothing sweet where you're looking for. So if you keep toiling in this area where there is nothing sweet, do you think you will be able to collect anything sweet? You will not. So it is like this. The nature, the reality of all phenomena is that they lack true inherent existence. However, we grasp at them, we conceive them to have inherent existence. And this is a big mistake. This is a big misunderstanding. So with this big mistake in the mind, we are seeking for happiness, right? Will we be able to find happiness if we are making this big mistake from the beginning? We are not. So it is like this.
Okay, so there is another question in the chat, Voula, from
Yes.
Ling. In the start of the class, Geshe spoke of the importance of merits and merits accumulation. While it is often said that merits are important and merits is gained through virtuous actions, could Geshe briefly talk about the type of merits that is truly beneficial in Dharma practice and for liberation of suffering?
Okay, so let's look at this. Often we talk about the subtle and the profound subject of emptiness, that we say it is very hard to understand and it's hard to explain. But if you compare this difficult subject, profound subject of emptiness, with the law of cause and effect, right, the presentation of the law of cause and effect, it is said that in comparison, emptiness is easier to understand than the profundity and the subtlety of the law of cause and effect. And the reason for that is that when we work towards understanding emptiness, we can use examples and also we can use reasoning. All right. So why is it then that in the text it says that understanding emptiness is a difficult subject? Because to understand emptiness, you must rely on a proper, fully qualified teacher, and you must have merit. If you don't have merit, and if you don't fulfill, if you don't have a teacher, if you don't have merit, you will not be able to understand emptiness. It becomes very difficult to understand. Now, therefore, we need to accumulate merit. And there are many different ways that we can accumulate merit, right? So first of all, you accumulate merit by relying on a teacher. You accumulate merit by serving the teacher. You accumulate merit by practicing generosity. You accumulate merit by practicing patience. You accumulate merit by practicing ethics. You accumulate merit by practicing pure Dharma. You accumulate merit if you set a pure motivation, and then even a simple act of reciting one mala of Om Mani Padme Hum becomes a very meritorious activity. Again, having set the correct motivation, you help the sick, the needy, the destitute, everyone who needs help, and so forth. So we have different ways of accumulating merit.
Okay, thank you. We have more questions, but class time is up, so we will keep it for the next time. Yeah.
먼저
Right.
40비시면 매대 durduji pu and the course.
Okay, so let's offer a short mandala offering for the sake of accumulating merit.